Big changes for Mercedes W14 in 2023. We're gonna be going through that and 5 other stories in today's video. So make sure to like this video, and if you want more Mercedes content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel hitting that red button down below. The first story is big details of the Mercedes W14 has been revealed. To understand whether the W14, the Mercedes car for the 2023 season, will be a direct evolution of its predecessor or otherwise, it is important starting from last year's car. This approach makes even more sense after recent statements from Toto Wolff about its continuity in terms of visible shape. That contrast, at least partially. The rumors supported also by sources internal to the team that the W14 will be a conceptual revolution under many points of view. The Mercedes W13 was for most of last season a single-seater from which it was difficult to extract the potential. In practice, ever since the pre-season tests in Bahrain, when the zero sidepod version made its debut, it immediately became clear that the ambitions of the Brackley team would be scaled down. In fact, the main problem of that concept was its tendency towards porpoising, which prevented the team from extracting the potential that the technicians had seen in the simulations. In fact, to reduce it, it was necessary to adopt ride heights well above the ideal level, causing a serious loss of downforce from the floor. Its unpredictable behavior persisted for a long time on all types of tracks, while the engineers directed by Mike Elliott searched, apparently with blind obstinacy, for the performance that was missing. In reality, the choice to continue development was not stubborn, but forced by the need to fully understand the problems of the project. In fact, with a view to 2023, it would not have made sense to immediately abandon the development of the W13 without having understood the causes that made it slow and nervous. In Brackley, they began to find solutions in Hungary, and from that moment it would have been possible to think about 2023. On the other hand, development continued until Austin, when it had not yet been decided which path to follow for the W14, whether to make a clean break with the W13, following concepts similar to Red Bull, or maintaining its principles in terms of external lines. The family feeling between the 2023 single-seater and the previous one could be strong. However, the rear could be less tapered in favor of greater stiffness of the bottom and different management of the flows at the rear. Recently, Toto Wolff declared that the W14 will retain much of the DNA from the previous car. The main changes will be under the bodywork, in terms of packaging, and under the floor, which will be redesigned in many areas, particularly in the sections of the venturi channels and diffuser throat. Given these premises, the sidepod could maintain a similar conformation to the W13 with vertical inlets at the front. It seems, however, that the rear may be less tapered, for 2 reasons. One of an aerodynamic nature, with a flat section at the level of the rear suspension, forming a T-shape at the rear to increase the efficiency of the diffuser by exploiting the beam wing. The second reason is structural. In fact, the large open floor space at the bottom of the W13 was particularly flexible at the ends, and to counteract the phenomenon, its thickness had been increased at the project level, increasing the weight. This year, the minimum weight has been reduced to 796 kg, giving teams a bigger challenge to lighten their cars. The gearbox will be a profound evolution of the previous one, with a different arrangement of the critical components of the rear suspension. At the power unit level, the technicians directed by Hywell Thomas, who have already fired up the engine, are convinced that the performance is in line with Honda and Ferrari. A massive effort has been made to optimize combustion in collaboration with Petronas, also improving consumption efficiency thanks to a new formulation of the fuel. If the sides remain minimal as on the W13, they will maintain vertical openings and visible deformable structures. On the right, however, the double-bottom version that could instead be adopted in accordance with the concept followed by the RB18. Note the different dimensions and supports of the mirrors. The second story is Hamilton praises Mercedes colleague for being integral to his success. Lewis Hamilton has praised his Mercedes senior race engineer Peter Bonington for being integral to his success. Bonington, known as Bono, has acted in the role since Hamilton joined the Silver Arrows back in 2013, with his voice on the radio becoming well known to fans of the sport. The partnership between the two also sparked the famous "It's Hammer Time" phrase that Bonington is often heard saying to Hamilton, something that Hamilton has explained the history of. "I think I came up with hammer time." Hamilton told media, including RacingNews365.com, there was a point where he was like, now is the time to push, and I got frustrated with him because I was like, dude, I'm already pushing. But I was like, if you're trying to signify now's the time to go all out, use everything you have. I said, just tell me it's hammer time. That was part of our growth. Hamilton believes that working with Bonington has been an important factor in what he has achieved during his time in F1. I'm incredibly grateful for Bono, the 7-time world champion said. I've had an amazing journey with him. I think we've got one of the longest, if not the longest driver-engineer partnership that there's been. He's been hugely integral to my success. Mercedes faced a difficult campaign in 2022, and Hamilton has credited Bonington for being supportive during ups and downs. We've supported each other on and off track, through good and bad times, he continued. I love working with him. He's like a brother to me. He's probably one of the few people that can truly stand me, I would say, like on the good and bad days, except for Roscoe. How calm he's able to be throughout the race, and how he's been able to guide and help navigate me through a race. I don't think there's many people who could do that. The third story is George Russell's Mercedes W14 wishlist suggests zero pods are here to stay. George Russell has a lot on his wishlist for how his 2023 Mercedes will be, but a change of side pod philosophy is not on there. Mercedes raised eyebrows throughout the paddock when their so-called zero pod design was rolled out for the second pre-season test in Bahrain in 2022, with a markedly thinner area for air intake compared to their rivals. The W13 lagged behind Red Bull and Ferrari for most of the season, due in no small part to Mercedes' early problems with porpoising, whereby the W13 bounced through fast corners and on straights as the car's ground effect aerodynamics made it oscillate up and down. But questions were also raised about what other areas in which Mercedes may have lacked compared to their rivals in 2022. With that in mind, when he was speaking to media including PlanetPhone.com, Russell was asked about what would be on his wish list for the W14 for the year ahead. I think there's a lot, to be honest. He responded, as I said, even though the performance was great last week, the overall characteristics of the car aren't too dissimilar to what we faced at the start of the year. So there's still a lot of improvements we need to make, and I think that's why it gives us quite a lot of confidence, knowing that there's still a lot of things we need to iron out. Addressing a question from PlanetPhone.com specifically on the zero pod concept, which made the W13 stand out from the crowd, at least aesthetically, the Briton said his team were prioritizing other areas of the car to look at for 2023. I think our issues don't really have a lot to do with the sort of side pod philosophy, Russell said. We may be wrong, but I'm quite confident it's not the reason for our lack of performance this year. To be honest, we're focused on other features of the car as opposed to the side pods necessarily. Discussing how his car was handling in Abu Dhabi, Russell spoke of the return of porpoising to his car that weekend, after Mercedes had seemingly managed to get on top of the worst of the issue after the summer break. Extra provisions to limit porpoising are being made by the FIA in the 2023 technical regulations to try and protect the health of the drivers after some severely bumpy rides were reported through the season, perhaps most pertinently among both Mercedes drivers. This is music to Russell's ears in particular, having suffered from the effects of the phenomenon again at the season finale at Yas Marina. We still had some porpoising this weekend through the high-speed corners, so that wasn't incredibly pleasant, Russell explained. It probably contributed to why we were further behind Red Bull than we have been on the last 2 races. The last few races, there were no high-speed corners, so there was no porpoising there. So it's good that the changes the FIA introduced for next year are still being implemented, because it's clear that porpoising is still hanging around. The fourth story is Helmut Marko says Red Bull would fear for Mercedes in 2023. Team advisor Helmut Marko believes Red Bull Racing should fear the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team more than Scuderia Ferrari this season in the title race. The Austrian consultant mentions Mercedes' advantage in terms of strategy and reliability for the upcoming season in Formula One. Red Bull and Max Verstappen had a dominant season in 2022. Ferrari could still compete with the team at the start of the year, but it soon became clear that the Italians were making too many mistakes and lacked reliability. As a result, Verstappen managed to take home his second world title already in Japan. Ferrari hopes to come back stronger this season, but Red Bull must also take Mercedes into account. After a mediocre season with just 1 win, the German team is working hard on the W14 to compete in 2023. Mercedes has always been good at further developing the car, something that was also evident last season. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell managed to get some strong results at the end of the year. I would say that we should fear Mercedes more, mainly because they have an advantage over Ferrari in terms of strategy and reliability. Monday, Marco told Motorsport.com in an interview, "Our situation is certainly not like that of Mercedes at the beginning of the hybrid era. We don't have an immense lead with the engine right now, so that is very different. Mercedes had at least 50 bhp margin over all the others back then, and we shouldn't forget." The fifth story is Mercedes boss shares details about upcoming W14 car. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff claims the team's 2023 Challenger, the W14, will be full of surprises. His comments come after the team struggled to understand the 2022 aero regulations, leading to a dramatic fall from grace. The Silver Arrows ended the 2022 season with only one win to their name at the Brazilian GP, leading to their worst season so far in the turbo hybrid era. The Mercedes boss told the media, "It's full of surprises. The last time I saw it, I thought, oh, this looks the same, but here's hoping it's not the same." The Austrian exec also claimed that the team now has a better understanding of their issues in 2022. He continued, "I think we have a much better understanding of what the problems were. We've been peeling only a layer of the onion, layers of discovering more issues and more problems, but I think we've come to the point that we understand pretty well why the car is not performing."